Welcome to Real Conversations with Patricia Schneider, the podcast that takes you on a journey around the world to meet some of the most inspiring and accomplished individuals. Discover their stories, uncover invaluable business lessons from their paths to success, and gain exclusive insights on how to apply their strategies to elevate your life and business.
I'm your host, Patty Schneider. Today, I'm joined by Tom Suvansri, a specialist in advanced insurance strategies and investment analysis. So welcome, Tom. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Patty, thanks for having me on. I consider myself a little refugee from the corporate world. I spent a couple decades in corporate America, and more recently was able to extract myself from it to pursue now something I find a passion for me around personal wealth and finance and leveraging as more of a tool to help us live like a better life, a more fulfilling life. So, I'm just so honored to be with you today.
Thank you. I know it's so nice when you can actually put yourself into your passion, because so many people, they have a dream and they hate their job and but it's like the world we live in. It was always, graduate, get a job, have a family, buy a house, and they just don't know how to break out of that. So I'm glad you were able to, follow your passion. Now, I guess, can you share a little bit about your background and what led you to become a financial expert and host of the Perennial Pride Podcast?
Yeah. It's a lot of it starts, my family's from Thailand. They're first generation here. And so I grew up here. And just like a lot of, not just immigrants, but families, just were never really taught about financial education. And, we didn't talk about it as families, like as when I was growing up. And so I was kind of ignorant to a lot of those things. But I quickly learned as I got older and watched my family, my father was a physician. They seemingly had a lot of things going well in life, but lo and behold, underneath the surface of it all was a lot of badness, certainly financially. And unfortunately, they went bankrupt, had hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxes owed. Like, it was just a mess all over the place. And as I got older, I watched this unfortunately happen and not anything I could do about it. And it just really struck me that I needed to control and own my future with that, right, with finances. So I just started learning a lot more about it and saying I had to take care of it for myself, or this could also happen to me. Right. So, as I evolved and learned more, I followed the typical script, right? A lot of the typical advice you'd hear, and I was following it to a T. And as I started learning more and more about it, I saw the crash of one in '08, and I started learning about it, and I said, this just doesn't feel right to me. And, just like we always do sometimes, we get motivated and we start learning about it. What other things are out there? And as I started learning more, I started realizing that the typical financial advice was meant to help sort of secure and control a lot of our wealth, and that other people that, kind of were on the outskirts were doing their own thing and learning about different ways to build and control our wealth. And that's where I started learning about it. I learned about real estate, learning about how to take over the banking function of my life, all these unique things, tax strategy, that were not being taught to me by my advisors. And so I use those things to help me extract and build enough wealth and income to be able to leave my job. That's literally how it worked. And I said, well, this is why I need to teach people, because now it has freed up my world to pursue things that I enjoy, to live a life that I want to live. And so it's just something become a passion for mine to build that freedom in our lives, because I ultimately believe most people want that. Right? They don't want to just follow the herd, but they need another path. And so I'm helping folks at least learn about them, and then they can decide if they want to go down that road.
That's awesome. And, it's always a joke because they don't teach you this in school at all. And it's always like a big joke where, half the stuff they taught me, will I ever have a use for this in my life? Probably not. But the stuff that's important, how to balance a checkbook, for example, you never taught us that. And, it is true. Most people have a passion. I shouldn't say have a passion. They know that they need to know how to do all this. Nobody has the time. They're busy with their job and school and whatnot. And, you can't always rely on just your random financial advisor, because sometimes, like I know from just personal experience way back in the day, I had my kids' little, their little nest egg from when they were born, their baptism money, birth, all that stuff. It wasn't a fortune, but it was something. And I had given it to a financial advisor and said, "Oh, I can't risk it. It's their money, not mine. Can you put it in something that will grow slow, but whatever." Well, needless to say, the markets tanked and it went to nothing. And I'm asking the financial, like, what the heck? And he's like, "Well, the market went down. What do you want me to do?" Are you serious? Because I wasn't your biggest client. It was just like, eh. And I'm like, so now through the years, I had to rebuild their money. But it's, again, had I have known how to do this myself or knew what to look out for, and I could have just tapped them on the shoulder and said, "Hey, maybe withdraw it into cash for a while," or something. So people do need to learn it, but from someone who, obviously cares about them, not just, unless you have millions, don't talk to me because I'm not making any money. That's.
Yeah, that's a challenge. And I have the benefit with not growing up in this industry, so I could see it from the lens of just like any other consumer, right? And clients, what would help people not just control our wealth, which I was finding primarily, like a lot of the systems and the advice out there, that you hear in the mainstream, frankly, and most of it is meant to control what we do. And seemingly put it on a lens of it's so complicated, you got to let us just manage it for you. You just can't conceivably do it yourself, right? And it's just not true. And then when you start really learning about it and saying my job is to empower people to learn about it because it's your money. That's what I always thought when I was a client. I was like, this is my money. If I don't take ownership of it, that's my problem. That's my fault, right? And we all have the capability to do it. And my job is just to enlighten folks to see what else is out there so that they can decide what's best for them and their families. That's my job.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you are few and far between. So I think what you're doing is great. So now tell us, what are advanced insurance strategies and how can they be beneficial for individuals looking to take control of their finances?
Yeah, it kind of steps back because in the simple way I look at like finances in general, and to your point about financial advising, that is kind of more the typical and mainstream. It's really hyper focused on investments, right? Where do I place it in the market? What's that diversified portfolio? That's typically where the bulk of the discussions come, and that's what we hear. We know there's just way more around this, right? Because I look at it on we're on two paths in our lives. One is a protection path. Like there's a lot of things, unfortunately, we can't control that could happen to us. Whether we die, disabled, divorce, you name it. There's a host of things. And then we have the wealth accumulation side. So they're kind of running like almost in parallel. I know we're doing the podcast here, but they're running in parallel. Well, we've got to balance them, right? Because we don't know what will happen in the next day, even 10 years from now, right? So when I got into learning more about finances, I was more conservative. So when I first encountered insurance, I said it was to protect my family. We always hear about that thing, right? We protect our families. But I quickly learned that life insurance companies are some of the biggest financial organizations that exist. One of their main jobs, and they've been around for over 150 years, a lot of them, right? You can't say that about a lot of companies. And they are just there to help do two basic things: protect our lives, right? And have a place to store capital. Right, that's what they used to do before banks became really popular. Right, that was how people used to store money, but it kind of got lost. And as I started learning about these things, I started realizing and learning from history of, say, the Rockefeller families, that one of the aspects of what they do is manage their wealth and control the financing function in their lives through uniquely designed life insurance policies, right, that have a lot of tax advantages to them. And so I started learning about those things and applying them to my own world, right? You can hear about that. And so those are the types of things that, as part of it, we use that as a storage vehicle, and then we can borrow from their coffers to use and finance our lives for business, for investments, to fund schools, education. So we use them just like a bank, but we can control the terms of it and sort of have more control versus we have to always ask permission from a bank to borrow money or use money, right?
You get penalized if you take it out too soon.
And the amount of cost that goes into paying interest to them is enormous when you look at over a lifetimes. That's our biggest basic need in our lives. And so we just use uniquely designed policies to store money and then give us control to access it for whatever we want, We don't have to
Right.
wait till we're 60 to use it. We use it when we want, for what we want,
Right.
and we don't have to ask for permission to use it, right? We use it for what we want to use it for,
Right.
and it gives ultimate control to people. And so those are the kinds of strategies, and there's a
Right.
whole host of them, but that's at a core sort of the sort of family banking side of things.
Right. And that again is something that most people don't know about because no one's got, obviously your broker's not telling you about it.
No, they won't tell you about it.
Yeah.
And even insurance folks don't even know about it,
Yeah.
a lot of them, because it's, a lot of them are designed in a ways that actually are not financially, actually cutting commissions for
Right.
agents. So there's not a massive incentive,
Right.
but I look at it more holistically. This is a tool that you're going to use to expand your wealth and control it broadly for your
Right.
business, your investments, to, like again, financing life.
Right. No, makes total sense. Now, you've a proven track record in helping clients achieve financial freedom. So, can you share a success story that highlights your approach and its impact?
Yeah, so a lot of it, stems from people building their foundations and getting their foundations sort of squared away.
Right.
And when I think about our financial lives, because it's, the first question I typically ask is, where do I invest my money? That's usually what I get, right? That's usually the sexy conversations, and there's a lot of places to invest.
Right.
But where I think we really excel is helping people step back and say, if you had a house, where would you start to build it? Well, you build it at the foundation level,
Right.
and that's where we start, right? Because that starts with education, where you store money, how you're protecting against unforeseen things. And what we find when we're going through and working with clients, we are absolutely able to solidify that to such a degree that they're protected greatly, that they can focus on where they go invest,
Mhm.
right? And deploy it into things, and they're protected in a whole host of ways. So in a lot of cases, it isn't, say, a magic investment that automatically changes the trajectory of their lives, right? It's really about giving them an absolute strength and balance in their financial lives, that they know that things they can't control are protected, and they have control of the capital to go invest where they know best,
Mm.
which is where I usually typically advocate. So I've gotten folks who were down the same road that I was just put money into the typical qualified plans, 401ks, and paying down my mortgage, and all the money's tied up and not able to be used. We help them see different things. One, tax strategies, where we've had them save hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially to deploy elsewhere, right? Strategies their CPAs are not even identifying for them. Money is being lost to them. So we're trying to recapture that and build the foundation, and then open up their eyes to investments that are just outside the markets, right? Where most people are really probably better served is, one, personal development, like building their skill set there, because that's going to last for decades and hopefully generations as you maybe pass some of this stuff
Right.
to children, right? Invest in your business. This is a country built on business, creating businesses, right? And people get so many advantages of building that if they have the courage and sort of longevity to it, right? They can withstand it. It's difficult, but they can control more of that. And then things like they can own, like real estate.
Right.
Those are the backbone of like where we start, and we've helped people sort of diversify their world so they have more of that, right? More ownership of things that are closer to them,
Mhm.
that reduces the risk, and actually in a lot of cases increases returns. So we
Right.
just try to reshape what they're doing in their financial lives so it's closer to them, in their control, versus trying to speculate.
Right. I like that. It's not that you're just saying, give me your money and just I'll call you if I need you. You're basically taking their hand and helping them do it themselves in a way, and that what's in the best interest for them, which I think is like amazing. So now, can you explain the basics of real estate investing, like particularly rental properties and private lending, for those that are new to the concept?
Yeah. And this is one where I started this years ago, and it was a scary time because I didn't, seemed so scary to hear all these things. And when I look now that I have the benefit of having about 10 years in doing it, and, successes and failures for sure,
Mhm.
let me be honest with that. You learned a lot. But, when you think about real estate, I think of it just like a basic business, right? When people think about real estate, it can be sexy, and there's a lot of ways to do it. But when I think about real estate as a business, take a single family a home that you want to rent out to somebody, right? You have one client, you have an asset, right, that hopefully generates income through a renter who's your customer, and you have expenses, right? And hopefully at the end you have profit, right? So when you really boil down to very basic things, it's actually fairly simple, right? If you treat it like a business, and that's why you put them in LLCs and protect them and operate them like an actual legit business,
Right.
it becomes easier to kind of put your head around. Like, why would anyone want to live here, right? Is it in a desirable area? What are you pricing it at, right? And what are your expenses? How do you mitigate that and reduce them so you can get profit? And thankfully with businesses, there's a lot of tax benefits with real estate. And so when you kind of really step back from it, it's fairly basic economics, right? We live and breathe it, and thankfully, we have to live somewhere. So we can understand the sort of nooks and crannies of real estate investing. So and to me, the simplest way I explain it to people. And then it gets into understanding, okay, do you want to own it and manage yourself, or hire help, right? Just like running a business, right? You can get a general manager to run it for you, employees, or do you want a property manager to manage it, right? So that's more the active side, right? But there are other ways to invest in real estate and not actually be actively managing it, right? You can loan money. That's how I started. You can act as the banker, just like banks loan money to investors and to buy a home. Well, you can actually act as a bank. That's how I started, and I loan money to investors, right? People that explained to me how they were using and deploying their money to make profits, and what was my safety. So I would actually act as a bank, and if they didn't pay me back, just like a bank would act, I could seize their property, right? And so we have contracts in place as a private lender, right? And we work at a person to person level, then versus having to go to the bank and basically subject yourself to basically disrobing in front of them, right, to get a loan, and now they have control over your asset. Well, you can act in that way too. So a lot of it is very basic, but you do have to learn and understand kind of what's your desired level of involvement with it, and comfort level, and go slow. This is a long run journey, just like a lot of things. And there's no magic bullet to it. But I have found it to be hugely profitable if you understand it and sort of make sure you get educated properly.
No, I agree. Where people can, you don't have to take on that whole entire burden of, oh my God, now I got property, because my mom did something similar. She wasn't in the same state. So she had somebody down there, basically running it for her. And, if they call her up, we need this, we need that, here's a problem, she was on top of it, but you don't have to take on that full, like, oh my God, how am I going to do all this? Like you said, you can pick and choose what you want to be involved in. That's great. So now tell us, what are some key tax strategies that individuals can use to maximize their wealth and minimize their tax burden?
Yeah, it's so funny now because I work a lot with a lot of CPAs and enrolled agents and professionals, and a lot of them are not really thinking about tax planning. They're more kind of historical reporters and compliance arms. So tax strategy is take some proactivity to it. But the way I really, for your audience members to really think about this is tax code is, which was supposed to be temporary, unfortunately. We know it's not, right? It is, when you look at this lens, it changed the way I thought about it. It is essentially a set of incentives that a government puts into place to dictate the direction of the economy. And so when you really step back from that for a moment, you can really say that actually, if you do what they want us to do, they're going to partner with you and give you tax breaks, right? And help share in the cost of it because you're helping them do things they can't. For instance, we back to the rental real estate. Well, they're not in the business of renting homes and managing leases and things of that nature. They need people to do that. That's why there's tons of tax benefits to owning that type of asset and that sort of business. Running a business, investing and giving to charity, right? Investing in energy like solar, oil, and gas, like all of these areas, when you really peel it back, they're all what the government is wanting us to do, right? save for retirement. That's why they give us sort of that tax benefit up front to do that. So Roth IRAs, so when you really step back from it that way, it's like, okay, then it is my duty to go do this, right? Find ways, right? Be a business owner, employ somebody, right? They can't do that. I mean, they do that. They hire a lot of people, right? That's where most of the job growth has been in the government. But so there's a lot of incentives. So if you're an employee, obviously there are fewer things to do, but you can by, I think, considering even starting a business is probably a good thing, and more people are doing these days. There are a host of benefits around that, with home offices, hiring kids. I mean, there's just so many things, but you got to sort of start exploring it from where the vantage point you are. If you're a business owner, you have tons of options, right? Because they want to incent business growth, R&D, right, to develop, right? You name it. And so there's really requires you to go seek out like someone who looks at it from that lens from a tax planner. And that's in our world, as in my family office, we have that because we know it is likely the biggest expense we all face in our lifetime. Taxes and interest to banks. Those are two are going to rob us of our wealth. So it's important to go explore that, because every dollar you lose in taxes is not just a loss of a dollar for you, but it stops it from earning for decades. Right. So you imagine the opportunity costs associated with that. So we take that stuff very, very seriously.
Yeah, again, stuff they don't teach you in school, but you're 100% right, because these are things no one ever told me. And I was learning stuff by trial and error. So having someone who can say, did you think about this? Or, and showing the long term. If you didn't do it, here's where you're at. But if you did it this way, look at all the benefits. No one's explaining this to people. So that's awesome that you're doing that. Now, passive income, it's a popular topic among your audience. So what are some effective passive income opportunities that you recommend?
Yeah, and I do want to specify, I mean, you hear this all over the place, and more on TikTok, I think, when I see out these things, like passive, it just seems so easy, right? And in a lot of financial world, like in the world now, they want us to be passive. That's why we're, they push us into like passively investing in S&P 500, right? It's the safest place to be. Kind of just keep dumping money in over and over again without even knowing the companies we're investing in, right? So it's passive. Well, in my world, when I think of passive income, it does require some active nature to it, because you got to learn what these things are. So, go back to the, real estate is definitely one area, right? It does take some energy, but you can get help with it, but that creates some good potentially some passive income. And then the offshoots from that, right? The lending aspect is a passive income, right? Because you're loaning money to somebody, they're doing all the investing and hard work, and they're just paying you back as a banker, right? And then there are investment types where they're probably too big for us individually to get into. Like you see a multifamily apartment complex. Well, some of them cost hundreds of millions of dollars to buy. You and I can't individually do that. So there are pools of private sort of groups that are put together to go buy, secure, manage the properties, and pull investors into it to be complementary limited partners. Those are called syndications. So you got to be careful who the operators are, right? Because you got to trust them, and that's where the active work comes in. Like, who are you investing in? Do they know what the heck they're doing? What's their track record of success or lack of it, right? And you got to use that time to review it and analyze it. So that's the active piece. But once you put it in, now they're the operators, right? They're going to run it. They're going to manage the properties. And then you get some passive income from it if it's successful, right? So those are all the different, kind of areas where you can do. And certainly like dividend investing is one area in the market. That's an area that people use too, even though it's taxed. But there's a lot of ways to generate it, even as a limited partner in business. You can kind of not be an active role, and you can benefit from whatever business you invest in, but you got to go seek them out.
Right. That's why they need someone like you who's going to guide them, because again, this isn't something you read about in the Wall Street Journal. No one's talking about this.
No, it's definitely not the typical, and that's why I say these markets, the general sort of tried and true markets are probably where people do need to start, right? Because they have to learn it, but
Right.
you're so far removed from what happens.
Yeah.
You just take what you get.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you're educating people and helping them along the way because, I mean, your success speaks for itself. And people who don't use this, they're going to be working to the day they die, unfortunately,
Mm.
because nothing else is going to bring them what they're thinking. It's just not the way it is. So now tell us, how does being an authorized IBC practitioner influence your approach to financial planning and wealth building? But first, explain what IBC is
Yeah.
for those that don't know.
Yeah. And so we touched on it a little bit earlier, and I would encourage folks, there's an independent site called the Nelson Nash Institute, and there's a gentleman back, and he's no longer with us, but he wrote a book called Becoming Your Own Banker. And so there, I won't go through the big, long story of it, but essentially he was a forester, a real estate investor, and he eventually started getting squeezed by the banks at the time when interest rates were just sky high. I mean, people think that interest rates are high now, but there was one point they were like 15%, right, or higher. And he was getting squeezed by them, and it caused significant sort of wealth damage to him and loss of assets. Well, he recognized that, lo and behold, he had all this money sitting in life insurance, and he didn't really leverage it for anything. Well, they have a built-in arm to them to control the financing. You just ask for money, and they give it to you, right? And they use your life insurance as collateral, right? And it's guaranteed. And so he started learning about that and utilizing that, and built this sort of, and then he wrote this book around becoming your own banker to control the financing function. That's all it is. Like we were talking about financing. So that's what the infinite banking concept is surrounding, is not to invest. It's to where you store your money and how you access money for financing. That's all it is. And so there's concepts around it. There's practitioners. I am an authorized practitioner to help people, but it's for that express purpose, right? Where's the best place to store money? Protect your family, right, from bad things, and use it for legacy planning, and then deploy it to things you know and control better for investments. So that's really what IBC, and that is one of the foundational pieces, because we need somewhere to store money, right? That's just a natural thing.
For the bank for what, 1%?
Yeah, right. And yeah, and so it's, everyone complains about the banks, but they keep on putting hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars.
They don't, a lot of people just don't know.
We don't know, right? We never knew that. We never knew. So this is a place to store wealth. And then, when you go ask for it, they don't check your credit, right? They just say you have it and we'll give you our money. You use it. You pay us back when you feel like it. Now you have to be disciplined and sort of on top of it. And this is kind of the sort of theme around all of this. If you're going to be passive with your money, the likelihood is there's money leaks all over the place, and you're going to be subject to the control of somebody else, right? That's just the reality. And I'm not saying that's a wrong thing. This is all personal, right? I know people who just don't want to play that role, right, in their lives. I just, for me, for the people I work with, they want that, right? They want to control it. And so we use this tool to facilitate it for storage. And then, a lot of families, and this is why I mentioned the Rockefellers, have used this and built it for generational wealth passing. So it isn't like I use all my money and then all of a sudden goes away after a generation or two. Their wealth has actually grown over the generations because they use these sort of concepts to perpetuate it. So the next generation, they have more wealth, not just to spend, but to build and create and provide more value to this world, right? They're not doing it just to make money, right? It's to contribute. And that, to me, is why me, myself, my clients, we use it in that way to enhance what we're doing. It isn't an investment,
right?
But we do need a place to store money.
No, I think that's amazing because, again, who's telling us this? And, we all put money in the bank and we all complain about, oh my God, there's like no interest, and you don't know what else to do. So, I mean, it is a good thing for, because it's funny how like nobody educates. Like I was just talking to somebody else. They wanted they just had a baby. They want to open up a life insurance policy, whole life term. But no one explains what any of this stuff is. And I knew somebody who did one. And it's funny, after years down the road of investing, they finally write back and said, oh, this is worth something, just so you know. And like, oh, what's it worth? And it was worth like $2,000. And they're like, I've been paying this for how many years? And the crazy part is, it's a life insurance that if they don't live past this age, it becomes nothing.
Right.
And they're like, well, how do I know it? But it's like, no one explains any of this to you. So it's unfortunate because, like, again, school, they teach you how to do stuff you'll probably never ever use. But having someone like you who can guide them and educate them on what's best and exploring your options, but here's what works, here's what don't. You pick and choose what you want. Because again, nobody tells us any of this stuff. You're just kind of going with the flow and hoping for the best. And that's not always the way to go.
No, no, and I use this too. I mean, I know this is more talking about finance, but I've adopted this sort of philosophy. You said how it impacts. Well, it's helped me too with like managing my health.
Mhm.
Because even though doctors, some of them are obviously more educated in the space that I am, they may not keep on top of everything either, right? And what's new and what's helpful for. So you've got to advocate for yourself, right, in all
100%.
aspects of your life,
Yeah.
because people are not always going to be on top of things and
Right.
be exploring,
Yeah.
right, what's better. And this is just a constant evolution.
Yeah, I mean, doctors, they're busy. They've got thousands of patients,
Yeah.
and they're working, or they're bringing in more patients because they claim insurance isn't paying them enough. Blah blah. You walk in, and like we had a discussion, they don't even know your name. It's just they're not advocating for you because you're just a check off on the box. Because we're like, all right, we got to do 50 more if we want to break even today. They don't care, So you're right. You have to advocate for yourself, and if you don't know, find someone like you who does know. Because just guessing. You're not going to read about this in a book. You're not going to read about this in the paper. And chances are anybody you talk to won't know about this either. So or they might know one way, but there's other ways. So,
Yep.
I always say, if you don't know, that's okay. Find someone who does.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So now tell us, what are some common misconceptions about alternative investments and how do you address them in your work?
Yeah. So, alternative investments, you kind of, whenever I hear that word, it almost people get nervous sometimes with it, because it seems like, oh, that's just for reserved for the wealthy, right? And there are some that you have to be at certain levels to participate because they're outside the public markets that are, what everyone is allowed to kind of access, right? So alternative investments and real estate is one. Right. And that's been around longer than even the stock market. Right. So you kind of have to, I almost like sort of diffuse it and say, alternative is not a scary thing. Right. It's investing in sort of more private type investments that are with operators, just not in the public markets. And it requires people to learn who they're investing with. Right. I wish people would look more into their public market investments so they understand it. Right. And test their advisors. Like in the alternative space, I think a lot of them are like, investing like in real estate and in oil and gas, and they're alternatives, but they're all kind of normal businesses that are happening around us, right? And some of them are public, but a lot of them are private. And so it requires investors for some of them, you have to be accredited, and that's like having over $1 million in net worth right outside, their home and having certain income thresholds. Which frankly, a lot of those people still shouldn't be investing in these things, right? It requires people to learn about them, right? And kind of meet with the people who are operating. And I've learned it over time. There are a lot of, just like a lot of things in life, like in businesses, they're not all great, right? There are bad players. That's the reality. I mean, you think of Madoff and these sorts of things, right? So there are, but when you look at the wealthiest people in this world, the Tiger 21 group, which is like all these like very like, I think most of them are business owners, potentially in hundreds of millions, $1 billion sort of wealth. They have most of their money in private equity or businesses and a smaller piece in public, right? Because they're knowing who they're investing with. Right? They spent the time either themselves or through their own channels to know about them. And that's where more of their money's tilted, right? The vast majority of people, because they don't know about them or not taught about them, stay in the public markets, right? And like I said early on, that's probably a good spot until people get educated, right? More. And so that's how I explain it to folks. I introduce them. And when you start seeing them, they're not that complicated. It's just how much energy and active nature you want to take in it, right? To learn about them. And some people won't, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. A lot of it is just like you say, people just don't know. And they know, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Everybody invests in the stock market. Well, to be honest, that's not always the safest thing either. How many companies have gone under? How many companies were taken over by an activist? And then even though like Reg FD, regulation fair disclosure became a thing, is that 100% foolproof?
Right.
No.
No.
But, people only know the norm.
Right.
But, that doesn't mean that that's the best and right way to go about it, because there are, like you're showing, a lot of greater alternatives. You just have to know about them or be educated or talk to someone who knows about it. And
Absolutely, yeah. And it took me a while to learn these things. So I lost money in
yeah,
certain spots because I got all giddy with
yeah,
the returns. I'm like, oh, this
right,
is great. Well, these guys are bad operators,
yeah,
right? And that was my tuition to
yeah,
learn those things, right? So it is something important to take your time and learn it.
yeah, for
Uh,
sure. And tell us, what advice would you give to someone just starting on their journey to financial freedom? And what resources or strategies do you recommend?
yeah, I think this is where it gets back to, unfortunately, we are not really taught about these sorts of things in school.
Right.
It's, and so I really go back to being educated. And there's a lot of great books, and over time, even the one that really shaped my way of thinking, partially, Rich Dad Poor Dad was one, right? That really got me thinking differently about it.
Mhm.
But even some things like Think and Grow Rich, and
Mhm.
getting educated and seeing a lot of different things,
Mhm.
right? Because what I've come to realize, we're all so unique, right? We're all different in how
Mhm.
we grew up and what we experience. And we forget about staying educated, right, on things. We
Right.
feel like we go through college. Oh, my son's in college now and can't wait to get out. And it's like, well, this is just the
Yeah, I'm
start.
done. Yeah.
You've got like another 60, 70 years, hopefully, of learning. Um, but we don't really start there sometimes. We just assume certain things and what we hear. But getting some of the even basics, like the best book I ever read that kind of got to the basics is called The Richest Man in Babylon. And it has so many good, and it's from like a long time ago, right? And that's why I always go back to a lot of things that I adopted, or they're not new, right?
Right.
These things are just solid foundational pieces that help ground your thinking about finance and its role in our world. Because what I had come to realize with a lot of these things is that we can get so enamored by success and the money, and we kind of overvalue it. I look at money now, and as I've grown and gotten a little bit wiser around it, is really positioning it as the tool that lets me live the kind of life I want to live, right?
Yes.
And that's really where I want people to start,
Mhm.
right? Kind of dreaming about that, thinking about kind of really what kind of life would you want to
Right.
live? Because I'll tell you this, there wasn't a life of working in corporate America for 20 years, doing almost the same thing and kind of in that same world. That not was not the dream, right? That was not a dream that I ever imagined, right? But that's where I went because I just followed it. I followed the road. And so you do need to step back from it and say, what do you want this life to look like for you,
Right.
right? And kind of learn more about yourself. And that will eventually start informing kind of the lifestyle you want and the wealth and the types of things you want to get into, whether it's
Mhm.
business or careers. We kind of always start there first, and then we kind of back into a life.
Right.
Well, it needs to be the opposite. I wish I knew that sooner, right? And that's what I'm trying to teach my friends, my kids,
Yeah.
and because that's really what it's all about,
Yeah.
right? Money in your
Yeah.
bank account piling up does
Right.
nothing.
Well, that's a shame because that's what the schools teach you. Once you graduate, get a job and, blah, blah, blah. And even when I went to college, you know, uh, all the classes that they made me take as part of and I'm like, what does that mean to me? Like, I don't need to know any of that. I don't care to know any of that, but you needed to take it to get your degree. But instead, how about teaching me something that's going to benefit me in life?
Right.
But and they just don't, and it's a shame. And a lot of people, like I know, I'm always constantly learning, like why, what's new, what's different. But that's because I guess for me, it's a little fun. But
Yeah.
for the majority of people, like you finish college, you're like, I'm done. It's a lot of work, a lot of stress. I got an ulcer from it. I'm done. But like I said, even if you don't want to understand it, get somebody who does because it's your life, your wealth, it's your legacy that you're going to just give to the banks they're just going to shove it underneath the carpet and they're going to get paid. So
And the last thing, one of the things I always it struck me too, and it's in the Becoming a Banker book. It's about the arrival syndrome,
Mhm.
And this is what I would highly encourage folks to just think through. I mean, the arrival syndrome is you finally figure out you know enough. You know everything you would need to know. And you basically drown out things, right? Ignore them, opportunities that may be coming. And you kind of say, this is it. And I stop. And, for folks who are in that world, unfortunately, they miss on a whole host of things that could be expanding and evolving and opportunities for them. And, that's why I tell people, even if you are not quite completely interested in this area or whatever, say real estate, start learning about it because you never know what it could lead to. And as you expand, like you said, you're thinking and you're learning about things, something else might come or somebody else might come into your world that you would never have ever encountered. And I've seen that over and over again in my lifetime. And I just keep on looking.
That's one of the things I love with doing the podcast. I, meet and talk to so many different people, and I learn so much on every single thing. And I'm like, I didn't know this. And then I'm always thinking, who can I put you in touch with? But, it helps me because I'm like, there's a whole vast world out there. I can't be stuck in my own little bubble. Like, what's going on out there? What's everybody else doing? It's like, I learn every single day. I'm like, it's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, anything else you want to talk on that we didn't touch on yet?
No. I think that's kind of the core of it from empowering. The last thing I saw this the other day, and it really struck me, and it's hopefully helpful for folks who are listening. Someone asked me to write down a list of what I should do. Like if I was thinking in my life, like what should I do? And we'll come up with excuses why we haven't done them, right? Or they're maybe not important enough. You got to change them. What do I want to do, right? And sort of think through, well, how important that is to you. Because, when you kind of can make the shift, then you say, okay, now there's possibilities here. What do you believe in that space? And what do I have to do now? What's stopping you? And then get on that road, right? And when I listed all the things I should be doing, well, I realized, you know what? Society tells me I'm supposed to do that, but I don't want to, right? That's my choice, right? And I'm letting someone outside of me dictate it. I feel bad. I'm not doing X or Y or Z. Well, that's actually giving away power, right? Your position to say, what do I actually want in my life, right? And for what reasons? That's for you, right? It's empowering. It empowered me quite a bit in what I work with, like with clients. That's what I want. I want them to want something, right? And then we'll help figure out how to get there. But you got to know that first.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to end this because you just know what you were told you have to do. No one ever thinks about, but what do I want? And it's funny because I'm dealing with that with my son right now. He's got a family now and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I have to get a job. I have to get a house. But what do you want? Is that going to make you happy? That's great if you have a roof over your head and food on the table, but are you doing what makes you happy? Because you can have, a roof over your head and food and do something totally different that society is not telling you have to do. But you go home every day and you're super excited to be, sometimes it's, quality over quantity, but yeah, I love how that is. Awesome. Now, how could people get a hold of you or learn more about you?
Yeah, certainly website, perennialpride.com. And I have a podcast, like you said, like I use it because I just love learning from others. The Perennial Pride Podcast, you can learn more about there. We talk about alternative investments, different philosophies, tax strategy, all fun stuff. But we just bring a lot of unique perspectives and mindsets to the table just to, get out of the mainstream, right? Just to show other options for people. So I encourage people to go there, and there's a lot of information there.
Yeah, even if you're not doing so, just listening to hear what's out there and what people are doing. I mean, like even people say, I don't have the time. You know what? If I have to take the train ride, or I always tell people when I'm driving, just put it on Bluetooth. I can listen to everything. You can find the time. You can find the time to watch, your crazy TV shows. You can find 10, 15, 20 minutes to listen to something.
You got it. And I'm not a fast talker, so you can do it at speed. You can understand it. You can understand.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Again, that was Tom Suvansri. Never miss an episode by subscribing to the channel. So thank you again.
Thank you for listening to Real Conversations with Patricia, talking with some of the most brilliant minds on their journey to success and their recommended strategies. Please leave your feedback and visit pristineadvisors.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Feel free to let me know your thoughts, suggestions, and anything else you'd like me to cover. Together, we can make success happen for all.